Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Unity 2D Rigging. My name is Kasanis. Guys, it's once again 4 a.m. and I'm up making videos, hoping to get my students through their semester. I don't know. I get up at 4 a.m. and I try not to be a jerk for the rest of the day, but it's really difficult because I'm super tired. Anyway, guys, let's get started today. Today we're going to take a look at the jump. We're going to animate our zombie, and we're going to make him jump. All right? Let's get started. Okay, guys, so we're going to take a look at the jump today. And there is what's kind of a generic jump. At least there's kind of a generic jump poses that you're going to want to look at. So we'll take a look at those today. And the jump is going to be similar in many ways to what we've already done. We're going to be using treadmill animation, which means that our jump is all going to take place right here in the center of the screen. The zombie's center of mass is not going to change in any way. I'm going to do everything right here, and when I actually apply my jump, I'm going to make my character move up in the air by applying a force to a rigid body. That's how I do my jump in game, so I've done it exactly the same way here so we can see it operational. I didn't put a lot of effort into this jump. All I've done is build very generic jump poses so that you can see what's happening. So let's actually take a look at a couple things here. Let's get right away into it. Our zombie, like I said, is treadmill. We've got a handful of generic poses. I'm going to select zombie and I'm going to open up the animation tab so we can see it. And what I've basically done is I've broken this up into several different animation clips as well. So unlike the walk and the run and the idle where we had everything in one clip for each animation, in this particular case I've broken up the entire thing into several different animation clips. This allows me to take all of these clips, put them into a Unity blend tree, and then move through the animation, the blend tree itself. There's a couple awesome things about doing it that way rather than creating an animation. In doing so, I automatically have a fall animation, so whenever my character runs off the side of a cliff or the side of a platform or whatever, he automatically goes into his fall animation. I'm utilizing the Y velocity of the rigid body to determine which state I'm in within the blend tree itself. That's basically what I've done here. So we're going to start off with, we've got several different poses that we have to talk about. First of all, the neutral pose. And I didn't actually create an animation for the neutral pose. What I assumed is that our zombie would be leaving from the idle state. So from the idle state, our first frame of our idle pose is going to be the first frame of our jump. And it's going to end in that same state. So it's going to start with the first frame of our idle pose and end with the first frame of our idle pose. Now, in between those two poses, in between that loop, to create that loop, we've got ourselves 4 other poses. We have our anticipation pose, our jump pose, our apex pose, and our recovery or settle pose. And we'll talk about whether or not we need all of these in 1 second, because oftentimes in games, you really don't need all of these different poses. Let's start off with looking at what I've got here. Anticipation, zombie anticipation pose. And let me just scrub it here so we can see it. Scrub. So that is the entirety of this pose. It's just one pose. I've got a couple of different things in here just because I found that the animation wasn't working properly. So I put in the way I've done it, the way I've done the code here, it wasn't working properly. So I put in 2 different frames making a loop. But this is it. This is the entirety of the anticipation pose. Anticipation, obviously one of the 12 principles, is an interesting one when it comes to games. Whether or not you decide to include anticipation within your game is up to you. It drastically changes the way your game plays, all right? Anticipation in animation is basically a mechanic that you're adding. It's a visualization of a mechanic that you're adding into your game. By creating an anticipation pose, you are saying to your player, in order to jump, you have to stop, you have to crouch down, and then you have to jump in the air. And that moment in time where you're anticipating is a moment in time where your player doesn't have control of their characters. So if you've built yourself a game that is all about fast action, you don't want an anticipation pose. You're going to want to immediately go into your jump pose. So really deciding on this is going to be up to you. The anticipation pose is really just a storing of energy. It's a moment of time where the player gets to see what's about to happen. That's what anticipation poses are. Anticipation as one of the 12 principles, is an opportunity for the viewer to see what's about to happen. It's preparation of what's about to happen. So there's about to be a big change, and in anticipating, it gives us a moment to say, okay, I can see what's right about to happen, what's just about to happen here. Just for an anticipation pose, we understand which direction a character is going and everything else. So in this particular pose, what we've got is we've got our zombie. He is crouched way down. He's storing all of that energy right here in his legs. His arms have been thrown back. He's going to throw those arms over his head in his jump to force his body upwards. All right? So this is really an anticipation pose, getting ready for our jump. Okay, let's take a look at the jump. So after our anticipation pose, we've got ourselves the zombie jump. And let me scrub it so we can see it. There it is. Now, I've got a little bit lazy in creating this particular animation. In fact, I did all of it, every single bit of it, with a single pose. Normally, if I was to create a jump, I actually would go through the entirety of the jump. I would create a movement within my anticipation, so have the character crouch down, and then have my character shoot into the air utilizing the jump pose. Now, the jump pose itself might consist of an opportunity for contact with the ground, all the way up to the point when the character has left the ground just before they hit the apex of their jump. So just before they've hit the top of their jump, I would include all of that within the jump itself, the jump animation. In this particular case, in order to show you how powerful the blend tree animation is, in order to show you the benefits of rigging, I have done the entire thing with this one pose. So choosing this one pose is really important. Normally, you would have a contact pose where the character is leaving the ground. And that's a really, really important pose. The contact pose is when all of the energy from the anticipation pose has been released. The character is completely stretched out, and they are, the toes are still touching the ground, but they're rolled up on their toes, and they're pushing off with all of their might. It's going to go from that all the way up to a pose that's very similar to what we've got right here, where the character is now flying upwards in the air, and they are moving towards the apex of their jump, the point where they're going to go from a jump in the air into a fall, right? They're gonna have that apex where they switch from the jump into the fall. And I've decided to do the entire thing with just this one pose. And in this one pose, I made sure that my character was all stretched out, that my character was, his legs were all stretched out, his arms are stretched out, and he is forcing his body up into the air. Okay? From this point, we're going to go into the apex. And the apex is, as I've already mentioned, the top of this jump. So let's find the zombie apex. And there it is. Let's scrub it so we can see it. There it is. So in the apex, we've got our character. He is got this C shape going. So he goes from this stretched out position in the jump to this C shape in the apex. And in the C shape, all of the energy has been released. Our character is now slowing down and going 0 over top of that. Like the velocity of his rigid body is going to be 0 as he's going over top of that loop and then coming down into the fall. So at this point in time, I've allowed the arms and legs to kind of like come up in overlapping action, and we've formed this C shape. And we're going to play this particular animation over a particular distance as the character moves from, kind of like a transition, from the jump into the fall. All right, let's take a look at the fall. So I'm going to switch over here, zombie fall, and I'll scrub it so we can see it. So in the fall animation, I've again got my zombies stretched out. They're now moving downwards, and I tried to indicate the difference between the fall and the jump with the feet and the arms. So now the arms are following through over top of the zombie's head, and the feet are kind of bent upwards as the zombie moves towards the ground. Again, it's important that your character is stretched out. We've gone from that C shape into this long stretched out shape, and we're going to see the difference between the two in the fall, and that's really what we want to do. All right, so we've got this fall now, and again, the zombie's not touching the ground. This could be used as a contact pose, so just as the zombie's hitting the ground. And like I said, once again, I've done everything simply utilizing the the single pose for each of these animations. I don't think I would have done this normally, but again, like I've mentioned, I'm just trying to show you the proper posing, the poses that you're going to need, and how simplistically you could do a jump with just a single pose in each of these animations. All right, so at this point, the zombie's falling to the ground, heading towards the ground. Gravity's taken over. They've gone over their apex. They're moving downwards. They're all stretched out, and they're about to hit the ground. And that brings us to our final pose, or our final pose other than the back to the idle. But the final pose that I want to talk about, which is the recovery. Here's our zombie recovery right here. Let's scrub it a tad. There we go. And again, the recovery is simply the follow through and overlapping action that we're going to have with this character. The character's hit the ground. They've struck the ground. Their weight as their body hits the ground continues downwards. So all of the weight here, the arms kind of follow through. They've collapsed downwards. All of this has occurred here, and we kind of get this C shape once again. Obviously, all the weight is on the feet at this point in time. And from here, our zombie is simply going to straighten back up and go back into their idle pose. Okay, so that is the entirety of this type of animation. So from here, like I said, guys, we are going to go into, finally, the idle pose. Where is my zombie idle? All right, so yeah, we're going to go back into this pose, our zombie idle pose. We're going to start and end right there. All right, so let's hit play. Boom! I've got it set up so once again we hit the jump button. And when we hit the jump button, you can see I'm going through all of those different poses. I'm in my idle pose, I hit jump, I scrunch down, I stretch out, and I land with a recovery. All right, it's not the sexiest jump, guys. I really put very little effort into it. I just wanted to show you that only with those couple of different poses, we'd actually be able to create the entirety of a jump utilizing the blend tree. All right, so you can see what's happening right there. All right, it's not a sexy jump. It's kind of an ugly jump. I would have put a lot more effort into it. It is really a very basic jump. And obviously, a zombie is probably not going to jump this way. I'd have to really give some thought on how a zombie jumps. A generic jump cycle is not what I'm really looking for. I'm looking for something along the lines of whatever a zombie's going to do in order to make this game really interesting. But you can see how all the poses come together there. All right, stretched out, stretched, scrunched, stretched, scrunched. All right, let me hit stop here. And what I'm going to do today, I'm going to show you my animator. So this is the animator right here. I went through, there's a lot of extra stuff in here. We don't need all these over here. Let me just move these over for now. This is the animator itself. I kept it pretty simplistic. So we can hit, because we're doing this through buttons, we can hit any one of our states simply by hitting a button. So we move from the any state into our actual state that we're going through. It's only when we do the jump that we travel through these particular actions. All right, I didn't make a single animation where everything took place. And maybe I should explain why I didn't do that. Again, if we had made one animation, with everything in it, with all of the different poses in it, like we'd done with the walk, it would have made it more difficult to be able to do certain things. And in fact, it wouldn't have allowed us to vary the time in which our character is jumping. Right? If we had already set up the animation, the timing of that particular animation would be already set. Our character would, travel upwards for 1 second, travel across the apex for 1 second, travel downwards for 1 second, recover for 1 second, whatever. We'd have a very particular animation. And every time the character jumped, the animation would be exactly the same. So rather than do that, allowing my character to change the animation state they're in based on the speed of their rigid body in the Y. So basically I've added a rigid body to this character, and based on how fast that rigid body is going, I'm going to travel through these particular states. Okay, so as soon as you hit the button, we go through to the zombie anticipate. Afterwards, we move into the jump blend, and inside of this jump blend tree, let me double click it so you can see. I've got the 3 states, all right, and I've got the 3 states set up so that if we are traveling at below than a -2, so in the down direction in the Y, if we're traveling faster than or equal to -2 downwards, we're going to be in the fall state. If we are above -2 all the way through 2, we are going to be in the apex state. And if we are traveling upwards at a speed of 2 or greater, we're going to be in the zombie jump state. So that's basically how this works. And this allows, if a zombie, like I said, runs off the side of a cliff and we don't want to run the jump at all, so the zombie goes immediately from having no vertical velocity whatsoever, no velocity on the rigid body and the Y at all, because they're running along a platform, and they fall off the edge, well, I don't have to then run the animation that does the jump and the apex. I can go straight to the fall, and the zombie kicks in with the fall animation. All right, so this method of creating an animation is, in my opinion, far better. Unless you know precisely how your zombie is going to jump or your character is going to jump every single time, then doing your animation like this is a better idea, in my opinion. Now, you really have to decide, as I've already mentioned, whether or not you want to include an anticipation and whether or not you want to include a recovery. In doing so, in including both of these, we are taking the player's ability to move at that point, right? You can't have your player still running around, or sliding around, I should say, on the screen when they are in their anticipation pose. That's a pose when they're getting all crunched down and getting ready to jump. And they can't be still sliding around the screen in their recovery pose. If they're still sliding around the screen in their recovery pose, it's going to look ridiculous. So these are 2 points when your character is going to stop moving. The player will have no control over their character at that point. You really have to decide if the mechanics of your game support the idea of utilizing an anticipation or a recovery. And yes, anticipation and the follow-through and overlapping action of the recovery are both part of the 12 principles. But this is one time where those principles kind of are either used or not used. And as an animator, you have to decide, as a game animator, you have to decide whether or not it's important to keep those principles going through the entire thing, through your entire animation, or whether or not you can get rid of them to support the game mechanics. If you want a fast-paced action game, you want your player to be able to make these fast decisions and just immediately jump out of the way, well, then you're not going to have an anticipation pose. And if you want your player to be able to dodge out of the way whenever they land and keep running as soon as they land, you're not going to have a recovery pose. I look at art and I look at animation as a visual representation of your game's mechanics. That's what I think of when I think of animation and art within game. It is a visual representation of your game's mechanics. Yes, it might be visually pleasing as well, but the anticipation, adding anticipation or adding recovery is supporting the mechanic of a pause between abilities, basically, is the way I look at it. All right, guys, that takes us to the end of this episode. Short and sweet. That means I can go back to bed for a few minutes, which is awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys are staying safe, all right? Stay inside, watch some videos, make something. Take this opportunity to be creative, all right? There's a lot of game jams out there, guys. Why don't you join a game jam? Make yourself a nice game. Anyway, guys, thumbs up, thumbs down, comments down below, and if you haven't done so, please take a few seconds to subscribe. Have yourselves a wonderful day, everyone.